Hey folks, Kostya here, and I just finished the first round of the 2025 Reykjavik Open. So I'm here in Reykjavik, Iceland, just started the tournament. Very, very excited to be here, very much looking forward to playing this event. It's actually the first tournament that I'm playing in a series of tournaments I'm playing in Europe over the next several weeks. And yeah, I'm going to be doing a recap here of this game that I'm very excited for. Actually, it's been a little while since I've done recaps. I used to do them way back in the day. In fact, I just looked it up, and the first recaps I ever did were 7 years ago for the 2018 Reykjavik Open. This is actually the first tournament where, for some reason, me and my friend, Canada Master Isaac Steinkamp, we were rooming together and we decided to start recording some content. 7 years ago, we did these like tournament recaps, which were very cool, just showing our games one after the other, doing some analysis by hand. And yeah, so I did that for a couple of years. Then I kind of stopped because, number one, it was taking up too much energy, especially when playing double rounds. It was super hard to do a recap after each game. I just didn't have the time or energy for it. And number two, at some point I actually felt like I was just giving away too much information. Like I was just talking too openly about like the opening and like what I know, didn't know, like what I saw, what I blundered. And I felt like I was actually just giving away too much info to possible opponents that could watch it and then instantly know exactly like what I know about a specific line or which lines I might not know, and so on and so forth. But anyways, I've decided recaps are back because for a couple of reasons. Actually, the original reason I wanted to do recaps in the first place was because I felt like number one, it would hold me accountable to look at my games and share my honest thoughts. So it would force me to take the games as seriously as I could, because I knew I would be accountable to the people following the games, that they would be expecting some answers afterwards if I didn't play well. But number two, it really forces me to get my thoughts out while the game is still fresh in my mind, because I just played the game. I just finished the game a couple hours ago. I haven't looked at the game with the engine at all. I've decided I am probably not going to be doing that anymore. I might check the opening for like a second the next time I play black, but other than that, I'm basically just like going to try to not look at the engine as much as I can until I've had a proper look myself and I've tried to like digest the game and the analysis and all that stuff. And the reason for doing that is so that I can actually try to like retain some of the info and actually get like real insights from the game later on. But anyways, without further ado, so this was round one of this year's Reykjavik Open, and I was playing a player from Germany, Hendrick Brackmann, who is around 2040 FIDE. And yeah, before the game, I looked it up. I saw he was playing e4, and actually, I was quite nervous going into this game because I had seen that my opponent had some good results recently, and he's a pretty consistent e4 player. Often going for the open Sicilian, winning lots of open Sicilian games. So clearly feeling comfortable in like open sharp positions. And so, yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect going into this game, but I definitely just wanted to have like a big fight and really just put my best effort into it. So I played c5, knight f3, d6. And this is already a bit of a surprise because lately I've been playing more knight c6 in this position, going for like Sveshnikov, Kalashnikov, but I decided for this game I wanted to play the Najdorf, and that is what we got. So takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6, and we have a classic Najdorf on the board. He went bishop c4. I think in his database he was mainly playing bishop g5, so I wasn't really expecting bishop c4. I was just kind of relying on knowledge that I had accumulated over the years, let's say. Okay, so e6. He goes bishop e3, and here I actually started thinking for a bit. Bishop e7. Yeah, I spent almost 6 minutes on this move because bishop e3, I wasn't exactly sure what to do. I feel like generally white is either playing bishop b3 first, or a4 is also a line these days, which kind of stops b5. Bishop e3 definitely makes a lot of sense, and I felt like one of white's ideas here is to try to play like queen e2 and castle queenside, and then eventually play g4. And I believe this is called the Velimirovich attack, which is a thing in the classical Sicilian with like knight c6. But since this is a Najdorf, I didn't really want to play knight c6, mainly because you're not supposed to play knight c6 in the Najdorf without like having a good reason for it. Generally the knight wants to go to like d7 and c5. Okay, so I started with bishop e7, bishop b3, and now b5, possibly threatening b4, so white goes a3, which is maybe a bit controversial. Like, I feel like the old school knowledge is that a3 often feels like a waste of a tempo, but I don't know, you end up seeing it in like almost all kinds of openings these days. Even when black hasn't played b5, sometimes white just goes a3, so, you know, obviously it has a right to exist. And yeah, my opponent here was still blitzing things out, so I was like, okay, clearly he knows this line. I was already kind of spending time here, and the one thing that black needs to watch out for, which I was aware of, is you got to watch out for the sack on e6. So if you play like knight d7, for example, or bishop b7, even bishop b7, let's say, then bishop takes e6 could be very dangerous. In many cases, it's just winning. I'm not sure exactly here, but like the idea is that white gets 3 pawns for the piece usually, and black has to lose castling rights, which is really bad. And just for example, I looked at this for like a second during the game. Knight f5, I was just trying to see like maybe I can make this work, but then I saw knight takes e4, white has queen h5 check, and I just stopped calculating here. Like, I don't need to see if white like has an exact mate. It just looked too dangerous. I mean, probably I subconsciously saw like king g8, queen g4 check, and I realized like this is just way too dangerous. And maybe it's not. Maybe actually computer finds something for black here, but yeah, over the board this looked extremely scary. So I wanted to avoid that, and I decided to castle. So now g4 comes, and my opponent played this quickly, so immediately, I basically got real scared because I was like, oh, I'm just like caught in some line. But yeah, I was, I didn't really think that. I thought I probably have something, like it's probably fine. I didn't think I'm just like, oh, I'm just like immediately losing. Sometimes that can happen. I didn't feel like I made a mistake at this point as black. I feel like everything I did was logical. Possibly I castled too early. That's the thing in the Najdorf. Sometimes you castle too early and you do get hit with g4, g5. But okay, I play bishop b7. I mean, there's not much else I can really do. And here white plays f3, which I was actually happy to see because it kind of blocks the queen off a bit. So here, of course, I am hitting the e4 pawn. I do want to take it. But there are ideas for white. Let's just say, for example, I played knight d7 here, which is probably not a great move for a number of reasons. There's like knight c6 and stuff, but there are ideas for white where you can go g5, let's say knight e8, and sack on e6. And this can be extremely dangerous. I'm not sure about this exact case, but the idea is that black's king just gets caught in this mating net. Queen h5 comes. g6 is always like a possibility. And then like h6, there's a sack on h6. Here, I'm not sure. g6, the knight comes back to f6. Maybe this isn't so scary. Maybe white has like other ideas. But with the pawn on f3, the queen wouldn't be getting to h5. Yeah, so I feel like once f3 was on the board, then I have less reason to be concerned about that kind of sacrifice. Although it was still certainly on my mind. So here I started spending a decent amount of time in it. Spending looks like 8.5 minutes, and I played knight f d7. So yeah, I with knight b d7, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do on g5, and I definitely felt like I wanted this knight to come back to d7 so that it could be a lot more flexible. And so yeah, I decided to just start with this move because I felt like, okay, probably white wants to play g5 anyway, and then I can, get a jump on knight e5 or knight c5 or knight b6, wherever I might want to go with the knight. I also consider like king h8 here, which I think is kind of an interesting move, just to kind of like, just like a useful waiting move and just seeing what white wants. And then if he goes g5, then knight d7, it's like my knight's on a good trajectory. But okay, I play knight d7. I thought it's reasonable. It also like hints at bishop h4 check, which white has to think about for sure. Queen e2, and then yeah, I definitely did consider this one, and I honestly just didn't know how to evaluate the position after bishop f2 takes, queen takes f2. I felt like, well, white has more dark square weaknesses than black does, so I kind of felt like this should be nice for black at first glance, like maybe queen g5 or something. But on the other hand, the pawn on d6 is now long-term weak. I don't have the dark square bishop to defend it, so yeah, I just didn't know how to evaluate this position, and I didn't want to go into it. Simple as that. So knight c6, I ended up playing after almost 15 minutes here, which is definitely too long. Like I should have just made up my mind much sooner. Yeah, the thing I said about you can't play knight c6 in the knight, or that's just not true. There are many positions where, black does play knight c6, and like this was one of them. So I thought knight c6 was okay here. White castles queenside, which felt very logical during the game. And yeah, I think now that the bishop's on b7, like knight c6 is no problem, because if white trades on c6, I'll get bishop takes c6, and then there's always this plan of like a5 and b4 stuff, and so black should be able to get really reasonable counterplay on the queen side. Okay, so here I continue to spend more time. 11 minutes, I played rook c8, and I was definitely thinking about other stuff here. Main move I was thinking about was knight a5, actually, and I didn't know if I wanted to take on b3, because I wasn't sure, because I'm spending a lot of time to capture the bishop. I was thinking my plan should be more like rook c8, knight c4, which is, yeah, typical idea. Obviously, in the Sicilian, sometimes you try to put both knights on c4, and you just kind of shut down this bishop. You maybe look to take on e3 if you can. And you have this idea of like rook c8, knight c4, and then knight takes a3 is a threat. Of course, rook c8, rook takes c3, also a big idea if we're taking on c3 and white has to double their pawns. What I ended up dissuading me against knight a5 was, number one, I wasn't totally sure about something like knight takes e6, takes, bishop takes, king h8, and yeah, I can't remember exactly what I was so afraid of here, but I was just thinking, like, with my knight on a5, maybe a lot of these sacrifices start to be stronger. But looking at it now, like after the game, it doesn't actually look that dangerous here. So yeah, I wasn't sure. Maybe I just thought rook c8 is ultimately more flexible, because I don't think I had a super concrete reason to avoid this one. White can also sack on e6 with the bishop, by the way, which is a thing, to get a rook and two pawns for two pieces. But generally, in my experience, I feel like black is usually happy to get this, even if like the computer says white is okay or white is better. I just feel like I've seen a lot of games where the two pieces just outplay the rook in the middle game, especially like these kind of Sicilians. So I feel comfortable going into it. Like I definitely wasn't worried about this. And yeah, it objectively looks fine. Like I feel like black is going to have great play with the knights hopping around and stuff. So I do think knight a5 was possible, definitely something to maybe analyze for later. But okay, I went for rook c8. I think ultimately I just thought this is like more flexible. If white takes on c6, I think at this point I was actually going to take with the rook to keep the rook on the c file, which looks awkward, but okay, I'm threatening maybe to take on c3, or I want like knight b6, knight c4, and yeah, I think the c file is useful. But white goes king to b1. Reasonable move, and yeah, I start hopping around. So knight c5, I spent another 4 minutes here, and at this point I'm actually quite down on the clock, which is not normal for me. Normally I'm playing pretty like fast and practical, but here it was kind of like a lot to think about. So yeah, I was spending time down to down 40 minutes compared to the opponent, but I did like my position because I didn't think I'm getting mated in the next 5-10 moves, so that's always good. And I felt like I have decent counterplay, where at least I kind of know like what my pieces are doing. I want a knight on c4, and then I want another knight on e5 or b6, and so on. Okay, so here I am definitely threatening rook takes c3, which is a typical rule. If you can take on c3 and white's castle queenside and you double their pawns, you should just basically always do it. It's like almost always great compensation. It's very practical. So queen e1, white covers this. But now I feel like, okay, he's slowing down a bit. Like queen e1, it feels like a loss of time. And I go knight c4, h4. H4 actually I thought was a very reasonable move. I was surprised, he let me have his bishop. I think most players, well, probably, yeah, I think everyone's first instinct here would be bishop c1. The problem is after queen c7 here, white's knight on c3 starts to hang because black has knight takes a3 as a threat. Which is pretty annoying for white, because you can try rook d3, but then you get hit with like knight e5, and so it's not that obvious how to defend the knight on c3. I think I wasn't totally sure about white maybe just taking, and then I would have to take with the queen, which I felt like was not ideal. I'd rather recapture with the other knight, so I decided to start with knight d5 after h4, knight e5. Because I could have also played like queen c7 in this position, threatening knight takes a3. But I think, yeah, I just didn't want to allow bishop c4, and then I have to take with the queen. And then, for example, like white can play knight b3, threatening knight a5, so I have to like lose a bit more time. Maybe it's fine for black. I wasn't sure because white's attack is kind of slow on the king side. I don't have any weaknesses. There's no open lines yet. So I still have time to maneuver my other knight to c4. So I actually feel like this might have been fine. Anyway, knight c4, h4, knight d5. And yeah, I didn't want to take on e3 yet because I just felt like I spent so much time with this knight to get to c4 just to take on e3, this bishop that's only moved once. So I felt like that would be kind of a tragedy. And then I also thought the resulting position would just be, kind of nice for white with now the kind of Fischer-Sozin bishop hammering on the diagonal, and he's got like f4, f5 in every position basically. So yeah, I really wasn't so sure about taking on e3, but I went knight to e5. And here was actually very interesting. I was expecting to move bishop c1, and bishop c1 was played after not too long, actually, like three and a half minutes. But I was definitely expecting this one because now it feels like, black is threatening knight takes e3, followed by bringing the other knight to c4 with tempo, and then it's like white might have to give up both bishops, which feels kind of awkward. So I can totally understand why my opponent played bishop c1 here. Oh, sorry guys, I forgot a complete, very important detail. The reason white didn't go knight c4, bishop c1 here is because black has the annoying move bishop h4. So white would have time to defend against queen c7. Bishop h4 was the problem. That's why white played h4, hitting the queen, and then the queen loses contact with the knight. So queen e2, now I take on a3, and I do win this pawn. And I don't think there's real compensation here after bishop e2. I think black just pulls back and is doing well. I mean, it's still very much a game, but we won a pawn in front of white's king, so that's good. So that's why he played h4, and that's also why I think this is so interesting. It's also why after knight e5, I expected him to go bishop c1, and then he ended up playing bishop. We both had this kind of mutual understanding that like, okay, well now bishop h4 is not a problem, so now he has time to save the bishop. He might as well save the bishop. But here after queen c7, things get tricky for white because how does he deal with the threat of knight takes a3? And yeah, it's not so easy. If f4, I'm taking on g4. And I'm definitely happy to take this pawn. I can follow up with like h5 and secure the knight. So I don't really believe in this for white at all. And so what to do? So he goes knight c2, which I guess I was kind of expecting as well. But now I get d5 in. And yes, another thing in the Sicilian, if you can play d5, then you should generally play it if it's not a bad idea. It sounds so obvious. But yeah, if you should play d5 if it doesn't like immediately lose or lead to a bad position. And if black can get d5 in the Sicilian, usually it's a great sign, especially here because we open up the bishop on b7 and we create this huge threat. And so now white structure seems to be collapsing. So at this point, I'm down to 25 minutes, but I actually started to feel great about my position because I felt like I actually achieved everything I wanted, and white is still very far away from attacking. So what should white have done? Well, on knight e5, we were analyzing after the game, and actually it was quite a strong analysis, and we ended up spending like an hour on the postmortem, which was great. One of the best things about one round per day is that you can have like a healthy postmortem and get a lot of ideas in. So we kind of came to the conclusion that white should have played g5 here, which again, I don't know if computer is going to say this. Would be interesting to see what it says. I'll definitely check later. But yeah, we realized that white needs to play g5 in order to deal with this threat of queen c7 in time. Because if black plays queen c7 here, then white can go f4. And this is awkward for black to deal with. So I can't take on c3 just yet because I'm going to be losing the piece on e5. And so if I go like knight g4, for example, I believe we were looking at this one. Knight takes a3, takes, queen c3, takes, rook takes, and it might have been knight takes e6 here, which I don't know if we fully analyzed all the way out, right? Because takes, king moves, bishop takes g4, bishop takes e4, hitting the rook and the pawn, rook h2, I would presume. And, okay, it's equal pawns. Not a very obvious endgame for me to evaluate off the bat. But maybe I would think, I'd probably think black is doing okay here. It feels like there's some activity. We have d5 coming. The bishop would be very strong. So probably black is actually okay in something like this. But I was quite worried about the knight on g4 here. Like I felt like it might be getting caught. Yeah, the other problem would be like bishop takes c4 to start, for example. And then again, we got to take with the queen, which is not ideal. Let's say like bishop c1 here. And yeah, if black doesn't have anything concrete, we do have issues with the knight being trapped. So I'm not totally sure about this position, but it felt very shaky for us after the game and analysis, like e5, knight f5, and so on. So on g5, probably not queen c7 because f4 is pretty annoying. Probably black would have to take on e3 and then go knight c4. Then like bishop c4, rook c4, f4. And we were looking at this for quite some time. And yeah, it's like a really interesting position. White has two knights against two bishops. You would think two bishops open position is great for black, but white's pawns are now like very, very close to our gates. And f5, f6, is a huge idea. Yeah, it actually looks pretty scary. Like we were trying to make this work for a while for black, but pretty much every line we were looking at was kind of ending in white's favor here. Like black's counterplay wasn't coming fast enough. So this definitely would have been, I think, the critical moment for the game, g5. Like very interesting moment to analyze to see if white is in fact doing well. Like we concluded actually white is maybe better here, and if not, then how exactly black needs to deal with this incoming advance of f4. So then after the game, like blindfold analysis, it was suggested maybe black should play knight b6 here. Maybe knight e5 was the mistake because this is what's hanging to this f4 idea all the time. So maybe the knight would have been better on b6, followed by like queen c7, and then again threats of knight takes a3. And I think it was a lot of analysis, but I think like the main line we ended up at was g5, let's say queen c7, and then I think h5 was even suggested because if black takes on a3 and queen c3, is this working? I think white goes knight takes e6. No, I'm not. Well, yes, actually, I'm not quite sure about this one, but it's possible because b6 hangs. So this is the issue. So takes, king h8, takes on b6. And yeah, it feels like it might be too much stuff hanging here because black would like to take on f3. That would be great, but the rook on c8 is hanging. So how to achieve this? So yeah, I think this is like working out for white. So black can't take on a3, it would appear, but maybe can play like rook e8, just getting out of like the knight takes e6 shot. And so position unclear. Unclear evaluation. That's where we ended up on. Because g6 maybe not so scary here. There's like bishop f6, and yeah, okay, big Sicilian battle. So yeah, knight d5, bishop c1, queen c7 was the game. White didn't get the chance to go. White didn't take the chance to play g5. Now after queen c7, knight takes a3 here is a threat, and so I am getting the jump on the queen side. White had to go knight e2, d5, and now I feel like the initiative has definitely overturned. So here white played knight g3, and then I ended up taking on e4 here. I didn't have a lot of time, but I was certainly considering rook d8, like this was my main move. But then I just wasn't sure what to do against bishop f4, like bishop d6, and yeah, this was just kind of hard to figure out for me. Like I thought maybe white starts trading, like takes on c4. I wasn't sure how I take back, and yeah, I felt very indecisive about all this. I also wanted to go here, and this is actually a really interesting line I should look at later, but I didn't know what to do on f4 takes and then e5, where like if I move the bishop, let's say like rook g1 or something, this felt kind of uncomfortable. Like there's like knight h5 coming, the knight on g4 is loose. I don't have h5 myself. It's like a French. White has a blockade. I have bad bishop on b7. Bishop on c. Like white's queen side actually looks very secure here. So This I was very unclear how to evaluate, but I also considered just like knight takes e5, and I thought this might be good, like sacking a piece for 3 pawns, and it feels like my pawns are very healthy, but yeah, long story short, I wasn't sure how to evaluate this position either. So I ended up just going for DE because this just felt like the simpler choice. Knight takes e4, and now rook fd8. And here, okay, I felt pretty good. But yeah, likely I felt like white probably has some resource here to kind of stay in the game, though. Yeah, practically felt really nice for black, even though I was still like way down on the clock, like 52 minutes versus 15. So white eventually plays queen e2, defending f3. I go queen b6, and at this point I'm playing pretty fast. Like I only have like essentially 1 minute per move because this is like move 21, and we got to get to move 40 to get 30 more moves. So definitely time pressure is certainly a factor. So queen b6, just simple move like hitting the knight on d4, which doesn't have any great defenders or any good squares to jump to. So white played c3, which I expected, and now a5. And okay, I was actually calculating lines here, or like other lines and stuff, but eventually I decided like I just want to kind of play like normally. Like I was looking at like different like sacks and all this stuff, but I was like, eventually I was like, I don't really have enough time to calculate all this stuff, so let me just go like a5 b4, right? Just like really simple chess. Try to open up the queen side, undermine the knight on d4. I didn't see an obvious defense here for white, and so yeah, I just went for it. And I think my opponent here, yeah, started spending quite a bit of time, like 12 minutes on rook hg1, but yeah, I think it was hard to find something that really is satisfactory for white. Like if the knight pulls back, for example, knight c2, which I think is a relevant move, then I was probably going to go bishop d5, just like improving the bishop, threatening knight takes a3 and taking here, and like, I don't know, maybe bishop a2, but this feels like I'm very, very close. I think I was even considering just pushing b4 here, and yeah, just trying to like open stuff up, giving up the bishop, no problem. Queen takes b4, and then I have like knight a3 check ideas, and yeah, obviously white's king is very, very open here, so this looked really nice for black. So rook g1 was played, and yeah, I think, well, the idea is to defend the g pawn and try to finally get f4 in, because here f4 I just take on g4, and the knight on e4 is hanging, and the rook, of course. So rook g1 preparing f4, but it's simply one tempo too slow, as it often turns out in the Sicilian. So I go b4, ab, ab. White cannot take on b4 because the knight on d4 hangs. White played f4, and I think I was calculating on my opponent's move because he spent a couple of minutes here, and I basically already seen that I can just take on c3 here, because if f takes c5, I was pretty sure c takes b2 like looked pretty good for black. I mean, it's kind of a piece sacrifice, but white's king is just opening up so much that I felt like black probably had enough there. But yeah, of course I thought rook takes d4 is just much simpler. Okay? I just take the piece, and white's king is opening up. White doesn't have any good resources here. e4 is hanging, rook d4, queen d4, the rook on g1 is hanging, the e pawn is hanging, b2, everything is just hanging. White's king is opening up, and my king is still like completely safe, right? So yeah, essentially I just thought this is winning for black. I will mention one last thing for white. Instead of rook to g1, the last chance I thought was maybe to play bishop g5 here, hitting the bishop, and so if takes, then hg, of course, and opening up the h file could be really dangerous, but I would probably have to go f6, which was my intention, but then I was like a little bit worried about bishop e3, like lining up against the queen, and then like if I take, there's going to be something on e6, like knight takes e6 maybe. I'm not sure. Bishop takes e6 check, but it looked a little loose, like to play f6 and weaken the pawn, but maybe just king h8, actually. This was our analysis later, king h8, and yeah, it's not so obvious how white continues, and I'm ready to take on e3 in the near future. Okay, so I thought maybe that was the last chance, but anyways, rook g1 was played, b4, takes f4, now I took on c3, and yeah, unfortunately for white, it's all kind of collapsing. He played knight takes c3, but now just rook takes d4, rook takes d4, and the problem is the bishop on b3 is hanging. So if white takes on e5, among other things, I can just take on b3, rook d4, and then I have knight a3 check and knight c2 check, and I pick up the rook on d4, and black is up a piece. So in the game, white took on d4 right away. And here I decided to just play queen takes b3, which basically just transposes to that exact line after fe and knight a3 check. I could also take on d4. I didn't really see the issue with this because if fe5, the rook on g1 is hanging, and if like rook d1, saving the rook with tempo and trying to take the knight next, well, then I can go queen b6 and the bishop on b3 is hanging. So to me, this looked like I'm winning a piece. I wasn't totally sure about like something here, so I ended up going for the other line, rook d4, queen d4. But I had a very strong feeling this was also winning. So, but I just had to pick between two lines that looked winning, and I only had 10 minutes, so I didn't have a lot of time to spend. So I was just like, the queen b3 line, that one just looked more convincing to me for whatever reason. Here I thought, let's see. I don't quite remember what was my issue here. I do remember that I thought this was winning basically for black, but I remember I came up with a fake reason to discard this just so I could play queen takes b3 and then not flag, because I like knew queen b3 is winning, so you know you only need one win, right? So like why spend extra time? What? What was it? Was definitely rook d1. I mean, it had to be rook d1. The rook was hanging, queen b6, and then I noticed like some random move that bothered me, and I decided, you know, I'm just gonna go for the other line. Maybe it was bishop c4 and then knight takes c4, rook d7. I'm just gonna say that was it. That's probably what happened in the game. I was like, oh, maybe bishop c4, rook d7 is scared. I don't know. And then I just like, okay, let's do the other line. So queen takes b3, fe5. White doesn't really have any great options here, but now we get the other line, check, knight c2, and take on d4, and my piece is basically over. I'm threatening rook takes c3 on basically any queen move, like queen d3, just rook takes c3, followed by bishop e4 check. I just saw is immediately winning, which is kind of a pretty line, like king a1, knight c2 check. There's other stuff as well, like queen a4, but this was the mate I saw. So yeah, it basically all over. Queen d1 was played, rook c3 anyway. Queen d4, queen c2 check, king a1, and now the rook just has to pull back. I chose rook c4, and it was time to resign. So yeah, I felt pretty good about this game. You know, it felt like a very nice, like, Sicilian victory. I thought it was, you know, a lot of interesting ideas, very thematic. Definitely a lot to learn from this game, because like it was very hard for me to come up with certain plans, certain ideas, evaluate a bunch of different lines that like I didn't fully understand. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do to improve our chess. So that's gonna do it for round one. I gotta get some sleep. We got a morning round tomorrow. I'll try to do recaps as quickly as I can, but yeah, this was fun. I definitely want to continue doing this. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Take care.